You're listening to The Adventuring Party, talking about gaming the Irish way.
Welcome to the party. I'm Eoin.
I'm Liam.
And we're here to talk about The Enemy Within, Book 2.
Dun, dun, dun.
I have several disclaimers. Disclaimer the first.
Book 2, Death on the Reik. Spoilers all over the place. Yeah.
This is for Book 2, Death on the Reik. We can't functionally discuss this book without discussing spoilers in any depth. So this is going to be spoiler heavy. So if you don't want to listen to spoilers for Death on the Reik, don't listen to this one. Disclaimer number 2. Heavy contributor to the show, our own SavageMick, is credited in the book for graphic design and layout because he did a bunch of freelance work for them on this one. And I did a bunch of encounter balance stuff for the book, so I'm credited on this one as well. So just if you're checking your table of contents, you'll see us mentioned there, just to get that one out of the way, and all properties squared away. Liam, I've run this one 3 times and played it twice. Mm-hmm. How about yourself?
I've run it once. Read it a bunch, but run it just the once. I guess I played the original one from first edition way back when I was in college. So probably closer to 20 years ago than I'd like. But yeah. It's kind of funny. It's a lot more of your kind of traditional adventure than part 1 is. Part 1 is very kind of sandboxy, whereas this is a lot more of your kind of linear adventure.
It's actually this weird. There's this weird dichotomy in the adventure, because the adventure is ostensibly a linear series of events. Because in many ways, you're traveling down a river. It's you going up and down the River Reik, encountering clues to a puzzle along the way until you get to the end of the puzzle and there's a big giant set piece.
Yep.
So in one way, it's very linear, except that this campaign this particular chapter of The Enemy Within gave rise to years of gameplay of people just getting embroiled and trading up and down the Reik as some crazy medieval version of Elite.
Yeah.
Of people going up and down, up and down, up and down, just making money, buying equipment, upgrading their barge. And it's this, despite it being a very linear adventure, for a lot of people, this turned into one of the ultimate sandbox modules.
Well, you do have a little bit of freedom in it as well, because while, yes, you do often, you'll be at point A and you'll be at Aldorf and you need to get to Kemperbad and, you go down the Reik to do that. You do have the option that you could take a carriage, and there's where you stop along the way, there's how much trading you do along the way. So although there is a very linear point A to point B, people can engage with it and do what they want along the way. And it can very much depend on the group you have, whether they want to engage with that. I know certainly in my own group, some people really enjoyed, like one of my players really enjoyed the trading, and that was great. And also it's, you make money with little risk. And unless you want to start bringing in encounters with pirates and stuff, which you absolutely can do, the companion has extensive details for trading and, for both hit points and how encounters and rolls and stuff can work. Players can see it as I can get a little more power here because I can get a little more money through fairly low risk trading, But other players, and another of my players, just did not like the trading at all, just found it really boring. So it can really depend on the group you have,
Yeah, I found that when we were doing it, we usually had one person who was all in on the trading. And was super enthused about it and was very enthusiastic about it. Like, made tons of money with it. And I was like, oh, that's cool. They've made tons of money. That's fine in many ways. Because there isn't, at a certain point, you do run out of stuff to buy. Until recently, they didn't have the big book of magic treasure.
Yeah.
So it was interesting from them going, okay, well, I want to buy this, or actually, I want to just make money, and they were just literally turning all their money into bigger and bigger cargoes of more and more expensive materials.
There is a little bit of like it's not like in a lot of systems where I now have a gigantic pile of gold, I can go in and buy magic treasure. There's not really anywhere you can buy magic items as such, and you can get better armor with extra traits and stuff on it, but it tends to be that stuff isn't book available. You need a custom order, which means you're going to have to spend downtime doing that and going to a blacksmith, finding a good enough blacksmith to do it, and then placing that order, So it's not really, your party makes a bunch of money. Okay, it'll help grease the wheels when they're doing stuff, but it's not necessarily the end of the world if they end up with a giant pile of cash.
No, it's not at all. But it's a fascinating piece of RPG history, because this is one of the first kind of campaigns that sort of inadvertently created the sandbox.
Yeah.
This is one of the real influential modules for sort of sandbox adventuring. And it was kind of done I'm not sure fully intentionally, but it certainly became the kind of thing that people were heavily looking forward to. And what fascinates me about this one is, in some ways, this is one of the modules that changes the least compared to the previous editions of it.
Yeah.
That Empire and Shadows had a decent number of revisions. This one is pretty much straight to the original Death and the Reich with a couple of smallish changes. And Power Beyond the Throne, there's a bit of change to it. And then if you look at the 4 and 5 are completely different. But this is the one that hewed closest, because in many ways, this is one of the best regarded of the chapters of The Enemy Within. That when people talk about how great it is, they often talk about that little bit of freedom they had, despite it being a very linear adventure. It's a very linear adventure. People felt they were very free because they could go up and down and they could interact with the plot wherever they wanted.
I guess the big negative that people take away from it is the classic ongoing thing of was it Graham Davis burned down my boat?
No, Graham Davis did not burn down your boat. James Wallace
burned down my boat. Sorry.
To correctly slander the right person here, James Wallace burned down your boat, and he had an essay up in a response about this on his blog or website back in the day. And if you look at the companion, he has I believe a brief panel about that as well, about burning down your goddamn boat.
Well, I guess I guess it did. So this is zooming right on to the end of the thing. Once you've actually done the adventure, you want them to move on to book 3. There is probably going to be the temptation that people are enjoying going up and down the river, doing all their trading and making lots of cash with fairly low risk, that you want to get rid of the boat, and the way you do it is to burn the boat down. I don't know. I did it with my group, but I didn't feel it was strictly necessary, because I think that there was enough. The party had already bought into going up to Middenheim for the next book, so, and I think it kind of caused a lot of hard feelings on it. So doing it again, I don't think I would have burned the boat down. So, but I mean, I guess look, you can chop and change and remove parts of modules if you want, as long as your party are willing to leave that boat behind. There's no rule, but even like the rulebook itself does suggest other ways of doing it. Like there are NPCs that you've met in the past and in the previous book. Is it Joseph? Is it the guy?
Joseph Coltrane, the Barabelli. Yeah.
Like one of the suggestions is that he's been abducted. His ship was robbed by pirates or sank or something, and he's like, "Oh, you need someone to look after your boat? Yeah, I'll look after your boat while you're away." There's various other ways of leaving the party with a boat, but moving it off the board.
Absolutely. It's got another classic opening. That's one of the things I'll say about it. Just like Empire and Shadows has a brilliant opening sequence, I really like the finding the abandoned boat.
Yeah. Yep.
And the boat that's currently full of mutants, including there's some amazing art in the book of basically a mutant pointing at this the Barabelli approaching with an axe in his head.
Yeah.
And looking very, very, very upset that these adventurers are coming on to ruin their day. And you pick up a boat, And then you get to do your first little bit of trading.
The crew's been slaughtered, and you can legitimately claim it as salvage. One thing I did like as well, there is an alternate suggestion in there as well, and that's what I went with, is that it's pirates, because I think I'd found with running some of the previous encounters and running book one, it was mutants. So I wanted to just throw in that, not every. Some people are monsters, and they're monsters because they've been turned into monsters by chaos, and other people are just monsters because they're monsters.
Yeah.
So I switched it up and had it just being river pirates. But either way, it's the important part is that there is a vacant boat that the party recover, and they now have this as salvage, and they can use it for getting up and down the Reik.
Absolutely. And it's this very interesting little... It's an interesting... You get in and you immediately make some money off it. And that probably gives some players the taste.
Yep.
It's like,
You got this cargo and you can rock into town and sell the cargo because, what else are you going to do with it? Got a hole full of wool. Somebody's going to want it.
Somebody is going to want it. And there's some interesting sort of plot hooks that have sort of been set up for much later on that get picked up in Empire in Ruins, which we'll talk about much later on.
The bizarre Imperial Edict.
Yeah, the bizarre Imperial Edict. But also stuff like one of the pharmacist that's gone missing that you go looking for shows up in Empire in Ruins.
Yep.
And there's an alternate turn of events when the survivor on the boat who helps you out initially and then leaves, she shows up as an alternate adventurer if need be in Empire in Ruins. So there's a couple of ways they actually went, let's call back to this a little bit, which is very nice. And then you start going on this trip, and there's this interesting kind of parallel adventuring party, or, bunch of cultists.
Yep.
Who are doing their own run, and the players kind of meant to catch glimpses of and see, they're up, somebody's up, that guy that we met in the first book is still around.
There's a table of kind of where that party are every day, and you can absolutely take a look at the book and take a look at the travel time between each of the locations and figure out exactly how far your party are getting every day. Or you can just kind of wing it and kind of go, well, if the party are seriously dallying, if they go to Camperpad and they're like, let's take a week of downtime, order some equipment off the blacksmith, and then we'll set off downriver again, then obviously you can kick the party down, and that will determine exactly how hot on the heels of this party your party are.
Absolutely. And you get into what is quite a cool little sequence where a bunch of dwarves ask for some help with their signal tower that they're building on the ruins of a much older building. And you get into there's something below here. No, you find out some more information about what's going on, and there's something happening here. And you start to get hints about the work of a guy called Dagmar von Wittgenstein. And what was he up to? And you start to pick up hints that looks like he went off looking for a big meteorite from Morschleib. Ooh, that sounds pretty interesting. What happened there? And you can go off and do a bit of investigation on that, and you get to look into because you have a clue about from the end of Empire in Shadows, about a certain evil wizard who was teaming up with the person in question.
Writing a gloating letter from the Black Hills.
Absolutely. You go looking for her, you find out, she's a wrong one, and you find her tower, clear it out because it's full of goblins.
One of whom is a rather fun piece of comedy.
There's a ton of good comedy in this, or at least good potential for comedy here. There's the goblins are kind of funny and sort of intimidating, in that there's lots of them, but mostly that the goblin is dressed up like the wizard, and he's trying to imitate her to cast spells. And hey, there's even a small chance he'll accidentally cast a spell. And there's kind of a bunch of bitter dwarves who are like, she robbed us in that deal. No, she didn't.
Yeah.
They're just bitter. They're just bitter because they
sold their dry mine and are convinced that there's gold in there when there's not.
Yeah. So absolutely, and it's this kind of little travelogue of going places and kind of interacting with it. It's not. It's often you're kind of finding small pieces of the puzzle all the way along. It's not like you're finding I find something like, immediately you're gonna, revelatory. It's like you find small pieces of the puzzle. I actually found, and I think we found this as well, that my players, got convinced that she was a member of the Purple Hand.
Yes. There are actually, and this is kind of a bit funny in that she's actually a member of a separate cult, the Red Crown. But the players don't really have any way of knowing that. No. And I guess it's one of the reasons why, if you know the lore extensively, that anytime there's a champion who unites chaos, it's terrifying because they spend as much time or more time fighting against each other than they do against the Empire or any of the kind of forces of order. So when a united champion comes along, it's terrifying. So the Red Crown are totally parallel to what's going on with the Purple Hand, but the party have no way of really knowing that or discovering that.
And it's funny because some of the party invested in kind of lore chaos and stuff and getting into figuring out a little bit what's going on. And I kind of said, no, these guys are the Red Crown a couple of times, but it did not take. And eventually they figured out, I was like, hang on, these guys aren't the Purple Hand.
Yeah.
This is something different.
Yeah, but I think my party, were pretty convinced that they were a gang in Altdorf.
Yeah.
Just a gang. Just
absolutely
nothing, no chaos affiliation whatsoever, or maybe dabbling with it, but that they weren't this whole parallel cult.
Yeah. No, not even a little bit. It is funny like that because you as the GM are kind of like, okay, you've gone very wrong here. How do I fold it in so that you get to figure it out in a way that isn't me just taking someone aside and going, oh,
does it matter? Like, I think that's part of the fun. And like, once we finish book 5, I have no problem talking all this out with the players and getting them to figure it all out. Because like there are there's several different cults at several different points throughout the campaign, and if they don't know it and can't figure it out, that's fine. And it nearly helps when you're running it for things to be a little nebulous, because if it doesn't work out or you misremember something, well, it's all a bit wishy-washy. So
yeah, I did have fun, but we're players saying this doesn't make any sense, and I'm like, I'm not wrong. What I have told you is not wrong.
Yeah. How you have interpreted it might not be...
It might not be exactly correct. Yeah. So it was fun from that point of view. So it's there's a lot to like in the adventure in terms of just kind of... It's travelogue in some ways. You're going along, you're experiencing stuff. So if you like kind of meeting new characters and kind of getting to know them, and there's people with a little bit of you'll never know who people will choose to be obsessed with or think is super important or bring along when they really should.
My party were very suspicious of the halfling cook in the wizard's hideout. She's just a poor help who's been caught there and horrendously mistreated by both the wizard and then the goblins that live there, but they're convinced she's sus. And you can make her sus if you want.
Yeah, that's again, there's a good bit in the grognard boxes here, which are the sections in the book where they give you alternative ways to handle things if your players have played
maybe this person's the villain.
Yeah, so which is good because I'm playing it for the second time and the third time, and I can be like, okay, well, I don't know for definite this is how it works out because it could be changed. There's all these grognard boxes, and she could in fact turn out to be a secret chaos cultist. She could in turn out to be the mastermind of the whole thing. I don't know. I've got to judge based on what she does. I know kind of how it's meant to go, but how it's meant to go is not necessarily the way.
It's one thing I did really enjoy in running the adventure in general is that like it gives you a very good template and then gives you all these little tools for tinkering the template and just running the adventure based on what you think the group will find most fun and what you think will kind of make for the best story. So I did really enjoy just it as a combined set,
Absolutely. And then you head off into the wilderness, and you go up into the hills where there's all these dwarven or these druidic stones erected around where this warpstone meteorite hits. And you run into a bunch of Skaven, And
that can be fun because that can be like if you haven't run any preceding adventures, this is going to be the first time that the party encounters Skaven.
Yeah.
So these mysterious rat men that don't exist, they exist.
Absolutely.
And one of them, he's Jack, bro.
Absolutely. I had like deliberately by me. I was like, oh god, this guy's got 40 weapon skill. No, lad, we need to do a bit more about that. He's not going to be a threat at all. And you head back, and then you find yourself in a race against time against these cultists. You have a big final showdown, probably, but not definitely, at the tower.
If you've been dallying, you could turn up when they've already massacred everybody there and left, or have set up an ambush, or maybe they haven't arrived yet. It all totally depends on what your group's been doing. You can, and it can be even just up to you as GM which way you want. Whether you want to go take artistic license and just go, it'll be dramatic if they both turn up at the same time.
Absolutely, but you can have them just leave because they can't steal anything important from the players because the players have the final key.
Yep.
And once they have that, they then know, okay, we can just go to the final bit and get to the secret laboratory and get the final bit of
the puzzle
information that we needed. To find out that where he went was his castle in Wichtendorf.
Which
sets you on track.
Spooky one what you passed on the way down to Kemperbad in the first place, and we're like, "Ooh, that place gives me the willies. I don't know how near it."
Yeah, and you get to go to the big final big grand finale, really, which is you come to this creepy village of Wichtendorf, and everyone's a mutant beggar for the most part.
Yeah,
it's horrible.
I mean, Warfare can be a bit of grimdark, at the best of times, but you can really have a lot of fun playing up and I kind of went more along the kind of the slapstick approach with this, because if you're playing this just straight grim, it is grim.
Oh, it's really grim.
There are beggars around the place that are straight up, they're robbing corpses and they are killing people and eating them. Like it is dark.
There's a woman with a baby who's mutated into a giant spider.
Or is she crazy and it's just a giant spider?
Yeah, it's grim stuff. Alternatively, you can have a beggar wrestling with a dog for a bone in the middle of the street.
You can step in and then you're like, I'll go bury that dog, and then you come along later and they're cooking the dog, or else the dog mauls the guy to death.
Yeah. It is. It's grim.
Yeah,
it's really grim. It's like at the end, like it gives the players, okay, we're doing something about this. This is horrible.
Yeah.
This is just. This is just really sucky.
The town of Wittgendorf is there, and it has had a gigantic. The castle has had a gigantic lump of meteorite of warpstone sitting in it for the last 100 years, mutating the people in the castle and the people in the countryside and the countryside in general. So they've had. Just in general, they've had crop failures and mutations and just a horrible time. And then periodically, there have been storms that have come through and wrecked it even more. And it is an unpleasant place. And exactly how much you want to play that up is really up to you as well. And as I say, whether you want to go for the grim dark or play it for a bit of comic effect. I chose that just because I felt we needed a bit of levity.
Absolutely, you want a bit of levity, and there's a really funny drawing of a beggar and a dog, both with a bone in their mouths,
fighting over
each other.
Yeah,
that is some good stuff. And there's a comedy Frenchman you can use.
There's a suspect doctor with their fake degree. He was in love with one of the ladies from the castle, and will totally try and doff the party in if they fall for it and don't find him sus. But I think you'd have a hard time not finding him sus. But he's pretty good. Like he's got the skills to back it up and make people think that he's a kind of a charming guy. But I think being the one not horrendously mutated guy or visibly horrendously mutated guy in the town should make people fairly suspicious. I mean, people were very suspicious of the barkeep, who's just grand. He's just a solid guy. But
I'm careful about when I get close to lads. I'm careful what I eat.
Yeah.
Yes, there are two-headed chickens.
Yep.
Yes, there are
two-headed, three-legged chickens. Look, I take a three-legged chicken in the house anyway because me, my wife, and my stepson all like chicken legs, so we need a 3-legged chicken.
Absolutely.
When we roast a chicken, usually one of us has to settle for breast, and we're like, oh, or I can just buy a pack of drumsticks, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, one or the other. And you get into the stage where you're like, the players have to go, okay, it's time for us to assault this castle.
Yeah.
And that's somewhat intimidating if you're like, oh god, a castle. But when you approach, you can notice that there are a number of holes in the defenses and a lot of slackness that can give you advantages to get in. And it's not necessarily as bad.
If it's one of the
GM is
if the players do it stupid and just do a full-on frontal assault,
yes,
like unless you want to pull some punches, they're going to get massacred. But this is where you can kind of give the players the tools to and they can feel really smart doing this as well. You know, they can do the scouting and find the ways in. There are rebels in the woods who they can make contact with just by generally being nice. And there's an encounter in the pub where these horrible cannibals are breaking in. You can save them, and then that can give you an introduction with the rebels, and they can make contact with them, and then that's some extra bodies now. Certainly when my group ran it, they were using them more for, they take an area and use these guys to secure it rather than, you know, using these guys as a fighting force, because they're farmers, they're hunters versus armsmen in a castle. You know, I made a claim, but I got the PCs to make a couple of rolls, and it was like, you look at them go, these guys, if you say to those guys assault the castle, they're going to get butchered. Yeah. If you fight with them, then, you know, they still might get butchered, but they're going to have a much better chance. So they just use them for holding ground, and that worked just fine.
You know, the like one of the interesting things for me was because the players went in there because they don't play a lot. They were coming in around 6k XP, which is way more than the adventure kind of anticipates. Because the adventure anticipates about 1200 to 2000 XP, because that's what I calibrated it off. And so I had to tune up a bunch of the bad guys.
Yeah.
Not all the bad guys, but a bunch of the bad guys need to be seriously tuned up. And they had an example of, there's the skeletal kind of captain of the guard who's sort of on his own. And the players, I really tuned up that guy. And the players fought him. And at the end of it, they kind of were like, whew, that was one of the hardest fights we ever had. And one of the players went, well, that achieved nothing though. There's nothing here. And one of the other guys goes, yeah, except we would have got into the next bit of the castle. He would have come down to see what all the fuss is about and butchered all of the people here. Because we could barely kill him, and these guys were nowhere near able to handle what we were dealing with. So it was like, they were like, oh, we achieved nothing there. And he's like, no. We stopped all of the outlaws from getting murdered by him.
Outlaws who were oddly pictured like banditos.
Banditos, senor. But it kind of initially you're fighting through a slightly weird castle in the first section. And then the second section goes full on crazy.
Oh, it gets, like there's the garden, that's the little shop of horrors. There's this bizarre aviary full of mutants who are weird bird people. You can have a lot of fun with that. I know my group were super weirded out by that, and I was really playing it up. And that was a lot of fun. There's a pit that they rightly didn't want to go near because it just contains death. It's just full of all the failed experiments. All got chucked in there, and they've made a horrendous, horrible mess. And if the players poke it, there, it's gonna be bad. And then you go into the castle itself, and it is a horror show itself. Like into the main keep, like the actual like residence of the von Wittgenstein, and you've got the family are just totally bonkers. One of them is into taxidermy and has taxidermied a whole bunch of the staff. And there's the sister who's into all kinds of medical experiments and has her little Frankenstein's monster going. And then there's the mother who's just no visible signs of mutation, but is totally crackers. I guess, what the nice touches of the bottles of perfume filled with cat urine. Because she's a whole bunch of mutated cats. But it's you can play up for a lot of horror with that, and I actually, just one thing I did find running on VTT was very good for that, because you can really utilize the light and the shadows and sound effects as well. Like, it was nice to be able to have, you guys are there, and I guess the whole thing, and it can be kind of tough to run that and keep the ambience going. There's a storm coming, and it's the storm coming and building the whole time, and then it kind of reaches a plateau, or reaches a high point when the party get into that part of the castle, particularly when they come across the monster. And that can be kind of hard to when you're sitting in person. That can be hard to do. But if you got a soundboard, just periodically just click a lightning bolt, and make make rain noises and stuff in the background. But you can throw all sorts of random sounds in there as well. So I did find the VTT worked really well for this, and I guess it was nicely timed, because when the module came out just as my group were hitting the actual keep itself. Because I had started to import all that into Foundry myself, and I was like, oh man, this is just taking an age.
Oh yeah.
Because it's
yeah.
The castle itself, like, doing the prep for that is daunting, because it is. I mean, what is it, like a flick through here? Like, what is there? There's like 70 odd different rooms.
Yes, there are, and there are. Whew, there's an awful lot of rooms. There's an awful lot of content there, and it's on different levels, which is a pain. Even on
62, and that's not even including the secret entrance tunnels.
Yeah, no, there's a lot.
So prepping all that in advance, but like if you can do that on a VTT now, and you just import the module, it was a lot easier.
Well, it's a huge saving, because I did all of this and all Power Behind the Throne, and they were both monsters. Yeah. They were both real monsters, and I run it that way. Like, run it. I actually had this big plan that I purchased a bunch of terrain, and I was actually going to build I was going to build Castle von Wittgenstein in effectively like 2 stages, and run the adventure on effectively a giant battle map,
right,
moving around the castle and stuff. And I had it all ready to go. I bought an awful lot of terrain, and then basically the whole thing went to where. And I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to go through that, but it's in. I swear to God, I'm going to end up running this again in a few years, and actually get to do it that way. So that with a different group, I would say, but it should be interesting to do that again.
Can I ask you, what did your groups do with Ulfhednar the Destroyer?
Ulfhednar the Destroyer got. He got specifically Ulfhednar the Destroyer got hockeyed.
Yeah, I just love that. I just love that. So, if you haven't run it, there's a random Chaos Warrior in the keep, because he wants the family to turn this into a bastion of chaos at which they could strike out from the very heart of the Empire, and the party could recruit him, and they can go, use him as a tool, and he will. And his stats are already pretty tough if you're going with that 2,000, 3,000 XP group. My group were already far in advance of that, so I did have to toughen him up quite a bit. But he's a potent asset, or the party could just hop on him. And he's got a big Minotaur buddy with him as well. So if you have the two of them on your side, it's a chunk. Because he's willing to take the family down if you butter him up just right. If he happens to think that you're also Chaos worshippers, but that's a nice little touch. I really did enjoy that, because the party are just suddenly thrown. Like, what do they do here? Like, what do you mean? This guy what? This guy could be an ally, but he's a Chaos Warrior. What do we do?
Yeah. They just got it. Like, they killed poor old Ludwig.
I forgot about Ludwig. I had a lot of fun with Ludwig.
Yeah, Ludwig's great fun. That's the only time I've ever seen a party kill Ludwig, actually.
Yeah. So Ludwig is he's the father of the family. He's just a perfectly nice guy who happens to have mutated into a giant cockroach.
Yeah,
and it's a bit of horror because there's cockroaches all over the place. But again, playing with the VTT was a lot of fun, because as people got closer and closer to the tower, I had harpsichord music playing in the background until they come into the room where there's this gigantic cockroach playing harpsichord.
And he's a lovely guy. He really is.
I was very surprised. I was speaking to the wife in advance around the game, and she was convinced they were going to kill, that you guys were going to kill him. And I was convinced that you guys were going to kill him.
Yeah.
I was like, no, they didn't kill him.
No, he doesn't give off the vibe, and he doesn't do anything really to provoke you. Like, they just kill him for being a mutant.
Well, that's one thing that I do like that character there for. Is like, just because people like it introduces that now, because all through Warfare, it's like somebody's a mutant, therefore they're automatically now part of it is because they've been shunned by society at large, because if they're a mutant, they're burned, you know. And you had that whole edict that mutants don't exist, they shouldn't just be killed, and now suddenly you got a guy who's actually a nice guy. Now, okay, he's allowing his family to do this horrendous stuff, which he could absolutely clamp down on, and he could put things to right, and he doesn't. But he still seems to be a really nice guy, and genuinely good.
Yeah.
So,
nice fellow.
But he's a mutant.
And he is mutant, and they squished him. Poor fellow. Yep. Although they said, why is they were killing him?
Yeah.
He begged for his life all the way down. So yeah, so it's a hell of a set piece, and it kind of ends. So it's interesting. There's a couple of things. The whole thing, the whole build up, is to a Frankenstein pun. Like that's the adventure. It builds to a Frankenstein pun. That's about it, you know.
Sorry, love.
Yeah. All right. Just put a thing marker there.
Yep.
So it builds to a Frankenstein pun. That's the adventure, and I always I ended it with, you know, basically, because you go up to the top of the tower and it's the lady Marita von Wittgenstein is there, and all of a sudden this monster comes to life off her table that she's built out of the body parts of all the villagers she's chopped off, you know, and you fight the monster. And I tuned up the monster so it wasn't a ridiculous pushover, but it was still a bit of an pushover. So they did
I did find it, the whole thing is a little bit weak, because like just the way Warfrip goes, any single combatant, unless you take extreme measures, any single combatant is locked down. And the way it goes is basically that, you know, there's a couple of rounds of this thing, you know, the table comes down and it comes off the table. And if you just run it as is, okay, but that stage, von Wittgenstein's dead. And now the party turn around and doff the monster, which is exactly what happened with my group. Even with like only one round of the monster being like, so yeah, I guess with that, it's, you know, you could do the monster gets right up, or you maybe deploy a whole bunch of mooks or something just to slow people down. Like that is in what I thought was a pretty solid module. That was one big weak point I saw.
Yeah, I did have the last thing he said was, as the monster expired, it says, "You can call me Frankenstein or Wittgenstein or von Wittgenstein's monster. I don't care."
I don't think mine even got a chance to say anything.
No, I didn't, you know. So yeah, it is basically just a giant. It is an extended opportunity for a von Wittgenstein pun.
Yeah.
And that's the fight. And then there's kind of like, okay, we're sort of done, except they haven't got the meteor.
They haven't found it, no.
So they go down to the
They
dungeons.
do also, crucially though, this is where they do need it. They're obviously going to want to search the place, and they will find a clue that will bring them up to Middenheim. Because they will find, as they're searching there, the sister will have correspondence to her brother, who is having a ball of a time up in Middenheim. And that's kind of crucial that they find that. And if they don't search and go later on to explore, you may have to figure out some way of making sure that they get that nugget to go up to Middenheim.
And then at the end, they go down into the dungeons and they go past the rather creepy jailer and even creepier prisoner. And
the jailer, I had a lot of fun with the jailer as well.
The jailer's tons of fun. Big green ogre.
Really stupid.
Really, really stupid. His prisoner, really, really mad.
Yeah.
And then a tax collector, which is really easy to miss. There's a tax collector and things. I don't think he's even named. He's not prison as well.
He's not, but crucially, the party are turning up and murdering a noble. In fact, an entire family of nobles. So getting that tax collector out alive is probably a good thing to do, because, you know, even though they're 100% in the right, these people are horrible people who have been torturing locals, experimenting on people. They are utter heretics. The higher ups probably won't take too kindly to people turning up and administering justice. There's a way of doing things. It probably should be an electrocount's job to probably the Emperor's job, because he's the electrocount for these parts to deal with this family.
Like, it's actually, I think that it should have been, your man should have a name and a little bit more personality to basically, he should be this outraged functionary who's been locked down here for a couple of weeks. These people don't pay taxes. What's wrong with them? And it's, I think it's one of the big, it's a very small part of the adventure, but it is a bit where you go, oh, there is still some sort of vaguely legitimate authority that was trying to check out what the hell was going on.
Yeah. Well, I did have that with, I did enjoy, now the party just butchered her anyway, but I did enjoy when the party came in and confronted the Lady von Wittgenstein, the matriarch of the family, her just being, what do you want? Get out. You're doing all this horrible stuff, and it's my land. I can do what I want. Unless you're the electric out of the emperor for this area, go away. And then the party ignore her and butcher her anyway, but just kind of going, look, I'm the law in these parts, so I can do what I want.
Well, you can also stab you in the face and get away reasonably clean. Yep. But yeah, the Skaven appear and they steal the meteorite. They get away from the players, which is a little bit of you got to hand wave that a little bit, or at least throw some stuff in the way so that they do get away. But yeah, they get away with the meteorite, and now thankfully that plotline actually gets picked up. Yeah. In the horror.
Previously it didn't. I remember the first playthrough was just like, what the hell? Where did all these guys come from? And yeah, I think most of the party had to burn a fate point. We ended up floating down a log down the Reik because the Skaven did a number on us.
They blew the place up. Ooh-wee. But yeah, that one was a little tight for us as well, I think, as I recall. We were fighting.
Yes, so one of the things that Skaven do, and it's one of the ways of making sure that the party don't go, so they collapse the tunnels, but they also put poison wind up the tunnel. And poison wind, one of the things, one of the results on the poison wind is like the D&D spell confusion. You will attack the nearest creature and keep attacking them, and that happened to the party. The party's primary fighter / damage dealer, and yeah, she just minced the halfling out of it, and possibly would have been. I think your duelist might have been in a bit of trouble as well, but then snapped out of it. And then that kind of convinced the party to cheese it along with the collapsing as well.
My problem was I was probably going to end up having to kill her to stop it, and that was like, okay, I can't overpower her because I'm not stronger than her, so I'm going to probably have to poke holes in her until she falls over, which is not the best.
No.
As far as things go.
I mean, even even trying to not do crits, it's still a tough proposition. But it's enough to make the party kind of back off. You could be kind of like it's a bit convenient that they've already turned up. I mean, other than that, you want the entire castle to collapse into the Reich. You could possibly just have the Skaven did it weeks ago. Or days ago, But you do kind of want the castle to collapse because it is kind of the big set piece of closing out this bit of the module.
Yeah, and it's a good finish. It's the whole thing kind of collapses, and then you're left kind of basically kind of going, oh, what do we do now?
There's a fantastic bit of artwork towards the back of the book with the castle collapsing and exploding. You can see some Skaven flying through the air.
like basically towers taking off like rockets, It's just good stuff. And then there's a little bridging adventure to get you more smoothly into the next part. Of the book, and there's a lot to like about the adventure. There's it is a bit railroady, but you have the option to make it much more of a sandbox if you want.
It's like, I'd say rather than a railroad, it's more like a cruise, because if you think about, if you do a cruise around the Mediterranean, then your cruise ship will stop off in Dubrovnik and you get off and do whatever you want in Dubrovnik for the day. And then you hop back on your cruise ship and then you go off and you head to somewhere in southern Italy and then you wander around for a day. And, if you really want, you could always hop on the train and meet that when it gets to the next Italian port. Like there is definitely there's key checkpoints, but you can kind of do a lot with each of those checkpoints and how you get between those checkpoints. So it's the basic format is linear, but I don't know that I'd describe it fully as a linear adventure.
Absolutely. The companion comes with a bunch of kind of optional rules, including the trading rules, which were a core part of the original book, and kind of much beloved. And kind of they're there, and they're not perfect, but they're decent. There are things I would have done differently with it, but they're not perfect, but they're decent. And then there's a bunch of other NPCs, optional encounters, optional rules. It's a grab bag of stuff for expanding it if you're basically trying to do a bit more with it. There's
there's extra stuff as well there, like with herbs and stuff, and bestiaries, which are always nice. Like, because healing is a big part of it, and having players like having there's no potions as such, but players like having, oh right, okay, well I have one particular symptom from a disease. Oh well, I can take this herb that will mitigate it, or I can use this to make a poultice to reduce the mitigation to mitigate that, which is nice.
Yeah. There's a vampire you can encounter in the Maria Borgia. There's the Imperial Plenipotentiary, who was interesting for me because became a useful NPC for me because the players met him in Kemperbad, and he got them out of a legal fix where they were being accused of murdering a witch hunter, which they'd actually done. And he's like, okay. And the witch hunter's sister, who was heading basically a bunch of Sisters of Sigmar, is like, that's my brother's hat, and they're clearly carrying my brother's weapons. They murdered my brother. And they're like, ooh, we didn't do that. And I'm like, oh, that's could you give me deception checks there, guys, or cool checks to lie? And they're like, we didn't kill him. I go, you killed him. And I reminded them how they killed him. They went, oh yes, we thought he might have been a chaos cultist. And I say, well, he wasn't. And now you're being... so he got them out of the trouble, but they had to go up to Middenheim to report to him after determining whether these people, the Wittgensteins, were indeed the people responsible for the murder of this witch hunter. And eventually they more or less blamed it on him. But they went up to... It became this useful NPC because he's their contact in Middenheim. So they could talk to him about what was going on. So that was useful. It was going to get them up there, get them someone to talk to immediately. Yeah,
it can be good to have an NPC in there that kind of does a little bit of direction. I've been using the what's the Emperor's childhood friend. Not that I haven't had to shoot a party that much because they have in general wanted to go along with it. But
your woman from Nuln.
Yes, no, not from Nuln. From. Brain gone. She's in Uber's Reik.
Oh yes, they met her as well. She's what's her name? She was the Imperial Herald.
Yes,
she's the Imperial Herald.
Yes, I've been using her, but it's good to have, like I say, it's good to have NPCs like that to push people along if need be.
And also like Dennis, Emmanuel Noct.
That's the one.
Emmanuel Noct, the Imperial Herald. Who was I think an NPC or a player character from, I think originally, Andy Law, who worked on the book originally. I think he kind of came up with it. Or basically, or certainly was heavily influential in her use,
So
yeah, and she's a cool NPC because she knows about the Purple Land. And she's like, okay, well, this is, these guys are dodgy. So yeah, I like it a lot as an adventure. It is not perfect, but it is. It is pretty damn good.
It's pretty good. I enjoyed it. There's bits that you can emphasize different bits based on your group. If they really enjoy the trading and stuff, if they really enjoy the traveling, you can be throwing in random encounters, and the companion has extra bits for adding in those extra encounters and stuff. And certainly towards the early part, I was stringing it out a little bit because I was worried we were going to run out of material that we were going to go through before Power of the Throne came out. Now, as it happens, I didn't have to worry about that because Power of the Throne came out well in advance of us finishing it. But sure, now it's all out. You can go through it at whatever pace you want.
Absolutely.
And there's some bits that I thought my group enjoyed more and didn't enjoy more, and I tried to emphasize the bits they enjoyed more and run less on the bits they didn't enjoy. And it's also just like, I'd say, like when they're going through the blasted wasteland to get to the crater, to try and recover where they think the meteor is at first. It's not the kind of adventure running I'm particularly good at. So, you know, in terms of describing how weird and gnarled all the trees are and stuff, it's not my strong point. So I kind of zoomed past a lot of that and then focused more on say running more in the keep and stuff where I think my strong suits would be. But it's a very good toolbox to allow you to do all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, I mean, that's a pretty thorough run through of what was on there. I mean, it's really just if people have questions about that, they can.
Yeah, hit us up on your Discord. You can on the Discord. We probably want to start a spoiler thread if people want to actually talk about this stuff.
I think so.
Or even if you're running it yourself and you're like, hey, any advice for my party have done this crazy thing. What am I going to do? Then, you know, Owen's run it a few times with our own and read it a bunch, so maybe we can help out and go, well, have you tried this?
Yeah. But yeah, that was the end of the thing, which Death in the Reik, which is a thing part. And we're going to move on and we're going to start talking about what we're currently playing through or have run. Power Behind the Throne up next. But until then, this party's over.
Thank you for listening to The Adventuring Party. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail, you can head on over to SpeakPipe and drop us a line. Or you can join us on our Discord server, where we keep the party going after hours. Otherwise, you can find us on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, or Twitter. Or you can email the hosts at party@theadventuringparty.net. The Adventuring Party is released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike version 3 license. But you probably knew that already. We hope you enjoyed the episode and look forward to seeing you back here next week. Goodbye.